path, right? The path to economic optimization of innovative activities. It is important for us to begin to. Hello, and hope you're doing well this wonderful Tuesday, June 3rd, 2025. Wow, just like that. We're in the 6th month of the year. All of a sudden, my name is Tolu Omadara. This is Amogate Communications, Amogate Radio Communications, and I'm very glad to be bringing us the next episode of driving economic growth with innovation. Driving economic growth with innovation. Again, my name is Tolu Omadara. Welcoming you very warmly, very gladly, very gratefully to this next edition of the program. And we are here on Amogate Radio Communications. How have you been? Hope you have had a wonderful start to the new month, and hope you're ready for some reflections that should attend the media, right? In a few weeks, we'll be halfway into the year 2025. And like we always do in Amogate, we advise that you take some strategic reviews. Look at how far you have gone. It will be the end of Q2. It will be the end of half year one. How far have you gone with your goals for the year, with your strategic goals for the organization, for your department, even for you as an individual, right? So we would encourage you to have those reviews. And if you want us to facilitate that process with you, either physically or virtually, we'll be glad to work with you. This is our strength, this is our passion, and this is what we have strong institutional capability to do. Well, welcome again to this next edition of Driving Economic Growth with Innovation. Again, like we always do, let's do a quick recap of some of the things we discussed in the last episode. Remember, in the last episode, we laid the foundation for innovation, adaptation, for commercialization. I repeat, we laid the foundation for innovation, adaptation, for commercialization. Basically, we were saying that innovation is a process. By the way, we've kept saying that from last quarter, when we talked about developing national innovation systems for absorptive capacity. We said innovation is a reiterative process, right? It's a process of trying and retrying, testing and retesting. Now, as we look at the economic path, right, the path to economic optimization of innovative activities, it is important for us to begin to, drive home the point that the innovation, adaptation, the testing and retesting is not just for the scientific or technological part, but also for the economic response to our, our inventions, right, as a nation. Very important. So remember again, this is not just about testing and retesting, trying and retrying, building and rebuilding because you're having some scientific and technological fun as an inventor. Necessary as that may be, understandable as that may be, right? But it's also about economic responsiveness, market understanding. So it's very important within this context to realize that the innovation adaptation is for the purpose of commercialization, because like I've been saying, this is our focus for Q2 2025, innovation for commercialization, driving economic growth with innovation. So the adaptation here must be such that is responding to the market needs, right? Responding to the very, I don't want to use the word vagaries, but honestly, sometimes if you might want to say, the changing preferences of our target market. Very important. Now we do a quick recap again of some of the things we said in the last episode. Last episode, we addressed some regions that feel that their entrepreneurial activities, especially when it comes to inventions, has not been well supported by those who claim to be investing, because they have invested without thinking about the regions. And we referenced someone who said dignity is not given, it is taken, right? We're looking specifically at Africa in that episode, and we said the fact that Africa has not really had an entrepreneurial mindset has not helped the region, even though the entrepreneurship mindset is the number one commercialization factor according to some framework. I repeat, the fact that Africa has not really had an entrepreneurial mindset has not really helped the region, even though the entrepreneurship mindset is the number one commercialization factor, number one research commercialization factor according to some frameworks. Now let me explain what we're saying there. Again, as a quick recap, we're saying basically that as long as Africa fails to create our own research commercialization framework, they cannot blame those who come to cash in on the gap, right? So if there's a research commercialization framework, it would be driven from the point of entrepreneurship, from the point of economic advancement and growth. So that way, even if others are coming in to partner with inventors or partner with innovators in the region, they will be coming based on the framework, the economic optimization framework for innovation that has already been laid. However, if there is none of such frameworks in existence, right, if you don't have economic optimization frameworks for innovation, those who come in to invest from other nations, from other regions, are simply going to take advantage of the gap because they are first and foremost entrepreneurs, they are first and foremost inventors, they are first and foremost, to be honest, many times capitalistic, right? They just want to come in and make their money. So in this context, we quoted someone who said dignity is not given, it is taken. In other words, the economic optimization that regions like Africa need to leverage sufficiently of their inventions and creative outputs and activities is not going to be given. They would have to take it. And that's what we've been canvassing for passionately and consistently on this program, right? We also said you cannot fail to create, I'm repeating this for the point of emphasis, you cannot fail to create your research commercialization framework as a nation, as a continent, and then begin to blame those who come in to cash in the gap. Very important. So the goal of innovation, as we've been saying, must be economic growth. We said that in the last episode. There are no two ways about it. It's not technology for the sake of technology. In the private sector, it's technology for the sake of business growth, right? In the same way, it's not innovation for the sake of innovation. And like we've been saying, it's not even innovation until there is full commercialization, there's optimum commercialization. So it has to be innovation for the sake of economic growth. There must be a strategic synchronization, take note of that word, a strategic synchronization between those who are developing economic policies and those who are responsible for developing national innovation framework. Very, very critical. There must be a strategic synchronization between those who are developing economic policy and those who are responsible for developing national innovation framework, right? If I am the president of the nation, for instance, or I'm in charge of leading policy making at the overall level, I would want to know what are our economic goals for this period, for this year, and for this maybe stretch a decade. What are our economic goals? And then those who are responsible for delivering those goals, ensuring that those goals are attained, those goals are achieved, must then also coordinate with those who are responsible for developing national innovation systems, national innovation frameworks, also updating them, because we don't just develop, we don't just create, we recreate, we update, and then ensure that those national innovation frameworks are capable of delivering the national economic goals. Very, very important. So again, it is extremely critical that there is a strategic synchronization between those who are developing economic policies and those who are responsible for developing national innovation systems. Very important, right? This is the gap that we said in the last episode. We believe the over-capitalistic investors are cashing in on the continent like Africa. The gap between the economic goals of nations, in the continent, the gap between the economic goals and the national innovation practices, or all of the creativity that is happening in those nations, is what the over-capitalistic investors are cashing in on. Now, research shows that a number of nations keep investing resources in the creation of innovations, but they are not thinking all the way through to the commercialization of these innovations. This is not just an African issue. We've seen it from our research in other parts of Asia and even other parts of Eastern Europe. The research indicates that a number of nations keep investing resources in the creation of inventions, but they are not thinking all the way through to the commercialization of those inventions, and that is a challenge. We must think about turning research into economic progress, right? Very, very important. If nations do not create frameworks to take full economic advantage of their inventions, like the United States, they are going to come in from other nations to do so. Others are going to come in from other nations to do so. That's the truth. So nations have to take responsibility to create and recreate frameworks that enable them optimize their inventions economically. Otherwise, others will come in from nations that have those strong entrepreneurial orientations. Very important. So, African countries, unfortunately, we also saw that they don't appear in the world's top 30 uh, countries where they export value added products. Very concerning. Again, for us, we see this as that untargeted synchronization, so to say, or lack. And let me not even just say it's untargeted. Let me say we see this as the barrenness of synchronization, right? We see this as a complete desolateness as far as the economic synchronization with innovation is concerned. Let me explain what I mean by that. So we have a lot of innovation or creative activities going on in Africa. That's the truth. We have a lot of people producing, people developing. You read a lot about all kinds of inventions in Africa. Yet we still don't have, one African nation among the world's top 30 exporters of value-added products. So what exactly are the creations about? What exactly are the inventions about? Why is there that gap at the policy level? Why don't we have economic policymakers sitting down with those in charge of education and those in charge of innovation and saying we need to target inventions, creative activities at value-added productions? Do you understand what I'm trying to say here? Let me break it further down. So if there is that synchronization between innovation, economic activities, and also education, right, then we would have a specific economic goal to increase our value-added products in Africa. In a continent like Africa, we would have a very specific economic goal to say we are going to be among the top 15, not just the top 30, the top 15 countries that are exporting value-added products. That becomes an economic goal, and there will be that synchronization. We then sit down, right? Nations in Africa will then sit down with those in the Ministry of Education or Department of Education, however it is called. We'll sit down with those responsible for developing national innovation frameworks and say, how can we, create policies, frameworks, funds, grants, inventions, competitions, right, that would ensure that this economic goal is achieved, this economic goal of placing Africa among the top 15 nations exporting value-added products. It's as simple as that. Do we have the brain power? Yes, we do. That's why we keep talking about brain drain. The best of Africans still keep going to, so-called developed countries. I use the word so-called because they also have their challenges, right? And those challenges have not gone anywhere. They keep on reviewing and updating. The difference is, I believe, they are probably more responsive and also more visionary, I need to say, right? I've seen a lot more strategic planning. I've seen a lot more directed policy in the nations like the United States, honestly, than I've seen sometimes in a nation like Nigeria. And that's why I keep talking about the gap, right? It's time to have that coordinated approach, right? Where our inventive activities are directed at clear economic goals. Very, very important. So if that gap is there, then you are going to find nations with a more visionary approach to synchronizing innovation and economic activities, taking advantage of it, whether from the point of human capital, where they continue to attract the best of Africans or best of nationals in regions that are not as focused on the strategic synchronization between economic growth and innovation. I hope you're understanding, because honestly, this is where the rubber hits the road, right? You've heard probably that those who fail to plan ultimately plan to fail. If nations in Africa, continents like Africa, and continents in other regions that are underutilizing the potential of the synchronization between economic goals and innovation, if such nations continue to leave that gap in place, they should not blame those who come in to take advantage of the gap, whether from the point of investing in the creations and inventions in their own regions, investing into the disadvantage of those who are making the inventions and the disadvantage of the nations where they're from, or from the point of view of, those coming in to take the best of their brains. And sometimes, unfortunately, when they go abroad, even those brains are underutilized. Whichever way the sub-optimization is happening, please do not blame those who are taking advantage of the gaps. Instead, take responsibility for creating frameworks that strategically synchronize economic growth and innovative activities. There is no other way around it, because like they say, dignity is not given, it is taken. In other words, economic optimization of innovative opportunities will not be given. You will have to take it as a nation. My name is Tolu Omoda, Amogirede Communications. Thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you for joining us on this all-important conversation, and happy new month to you again. All right, so let's wrap up the highlights from last week, and then we will go into the depth of this week, right? So we then also, of course, gave concerning data like the fact that the combined value of Africa's export at about 640 billion, I think it's now about 700 billion. So let's even say 700 billion, between 640 billion to 700 billion, the combined value of Africa's export is almost equivalent to that of just one country, that's South Korea, and that's very concerning. So you have 54 African countries, right, and their combined export value is about what just one country, but a country that focuses a lot on value-added products like your Samsung phone, if you use one, that South Korea is churning out. South Korea, as just one nation, is churning out value-added products, right? Or churning out products that are equal to the value of what 54 African countries are churning out. That is very concerning. Again, I'm making the connection between these at an untargeted innovation that is not directed at driving economic growth. Because, like I said, as long as you are not playing at the optimal end of the competitive global chain, at the or the competitive end, beg your pardon, of the global value chain, as long as you're not ensuring that you are, targeting your creative activities as a nation based on your innovation policy, as long as you're not ensuring that you're targeting it and producing more of value-added products, then your exports would largely be in the primary stage, and you cannot get the bang for the buck. You cannot get the best of economic advantage at that level. And this is where innovation should come in. We should ensure that, for instance, we are turning more of our cocoa into chocolate right here in Africa. I know Ghana made some progress with that. A whole lot more needs to be done. We should ensure that we're turning more of our cocoa into coffee. Ethiopia needs to work on that. Africa should ensure that they are turning more of their crude oil into processed oil. I know Dangote refinery in Nigeria helped to change a little bit of that, but there is a whole lot more to be done. We should ensure that we are turning more of our lithium into the laptops instead of having all kinds of unnecessary conflicts created simply because some are interested in lithium and all the other raw materials they then take out of Africa to produce the laptops, and they make the billions of dollars from it, simply because we are not targeting our creative activities at those optimal ends of the global value chain. Please, I want you to take very, very keen note of these things that we're sharing. They are very critical. They are capable of laying the foundation for new generations. Extremely important. There must be targeted innovative activities, and those creative activities must be targeted at driving economic growth. I'm talking about the kind of economic growth that would make us stop depending on foreign exchange in Africa, continents like Africa, stop depending on, make them less vulnerable to imported inflation that comes along with bringing most of your developed products from outside the continent. We need to step in because there is a creative gap. There is an innovation gap. And that innovation gap can only be bridged when innovative activities are targeted more strategically, more intentionally, more deliberately, more consistently, more resiliently to or at driving economic growth. That has been the core, that has been the focus of this quarter, and we will continue to hammer it until we get the points, right? Now, one last thing we want to say about last week. Again, these things is important. They are very important for us to re-emphasize them, to further break them down, right? We said that, unfortunately, one of the things we also saw is that sometimes, while nations are investing in creative activities and set aside funds for creative activities, unfortunately, they do not simultaneously create the funds for the commercialization, right? They don't, sometimes they don't see all the way through to commercialization. Last quarter, we kept emphasizing that innovation is that journey from conceptualization all the way to commercialization. I'll say that again. We kept emphasizing last quarter that innovation is the journey from conceptualization all the way to commercialization, right? One of the things we saw is that because there is no intentionality many times in many nations, the intentionality around commercialization is lacking. There are no processes or no strong processes to study buyer response, for instance, to new products and innovations. There are no processes, no, fundings for studying supplier participation studies, for instance, market response surveys, and all of these things are required to enable the inventors make the necessary adaptations for optimal innovation commercialization to the end of economic growth, right? This is important. Let me break it down. So you have a new invention, and this is where we'll continue from this week. You have a new invention, you create the new invention, you put it out in the market, and you think that's where the funding stops, you think that's where the support stops. In fact, you think that's where the creativity stops. No. Just as you have been creative around developing the new products, you must also be creative around finding the best paths to commercialization. I'm going to say that again. Just as you have deployed creativity or supported creativity as far as designing new products is concerned, you must also see the process, right? The process of commercialization as a creative activity that you must also support all the way through. Not just from the beginning, but right to the end where it delivers the economic growth. Because if that does not happen, if we are not ready to support the studies of buyer response to new products, if you're not ready to ensure that supplier participation is studied, market response surveys are supported to enable you as a nation and support those who are creating to make the necessary adaptations for optimal innovation commercialization, then you can kiss economic growth goodbye. It's as simple as that. Economic growth only happens when you don't just put out the new product, but you also begin to drive the commercialization, the full-scale optimal commercialization of that new product. And that brings us to where we're going to continue from this week, right? This episode, we are going to continue with innovation adaptation for commercialization. I repeat, innovation adaptation for commercialization. We're going to look at some of the activities or some of the efforts that were made in this regard, right? There was a particular study that was focusing on measuring commercialization success of innovation in the European Union. I repeat, a particular study was focused on measuring commercialization success of innovation in the European Union. And I really like this because, like I said, it's time for other regions who are not doing this to begin to say we cannot just fund. So this particular study was measuring the commercialization success of innovation in the European Union. And one of the things I liked about this study is that looked at the problem generally, right? And the study said, look, we need to analyze the commercial success that has been achieved by our innovative activities in the field of industrial technologies. Very important, right? And they began to say, okay, which products have been commercially successful in the market and which products have not been commercially successful in the market. Now, this study said, according to this study, they hypothesized that not all innovations can be commercialized. Now, why I would tend to agree with them is because I remember last quarter we emphasized that there will be exploratory innovation and exploitative innovation. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Amoge Radio Communications. This particular program I'm referring to is titled Developing National Innovation Systems for Absorptive Capacity. We spoke a lot about the difference between exploratory innovation and exploitative innovation. I think I referenced it in the earlier episodes, or one of the earliest episodes of this program, this current program for this quarter. So there is a place for exploratory innovation, like we said, where we are generally still, developing ideas for the sake of ideas, if I can put it that way, rather than focusing on turning ideas into industries. And that is okay, because many times the exploitative innovation that will deliver the commercial value will often come from what you have discovered from the exploratory innovation. Let me compare it to research. Sometimes when you're researching, you're just learning. You are not putting your thoughts together yet. You're not articulating yet. You're not even writing yet, right? All you're doing is you're just learning. So that can be compared to the exploratory innovation, where you're creating for the sake of creating. But it must end there. From that exploratory innovation, which appears not to bring the commercial success, must come the seed, SEED, the seed for the exploitative innovation that will then drive economic growth. Therefore, at the end of the day, this is where we differ slightly from this study. At the end of the day, ultimately, all innovation must still lead to commercial success. Do you get what I'm saying? It's just that some would not lead directly to commercial success, like the exploratory innovation, which provides the seed for the exploitative innovation, and then some would then lead more directly to the commercial success, like the exploitative innovation, which often takes a seed, which often feeds, FEEDS, which often feeds from the exploratory innovation, right? But yes, they are right. For us, we will modify it by saying that not all innovations can be directly commercialized, right? Ultimately, all innovations must be capable of commercialization, and that's what we are emphasizing in this quarter's program, Driving Economic Growth Innovation. However, some innovations will be leading indirectly to economic growth or commercialization, while some innovations like the exploitative innovation should be leading more directly to economic growth. I hope we've made some sense there. And I hope you're still enjoying this session as much as I am, right? My name is Sitolo Madara. I'm Amoge Radio Communications, and we're talking about driving economic growth with innovation. Now, to achieve financial success, according to this study, right, it's important to assess the potential for commercialization from the beginning. And this was quite interesting, to be honest. For them, they said, look, you have to assess the risks associated with failure of the overall commercialization process. In other words, it's like when I was speaking with a partner in charge of artificial intelligence, robotics, and IT, right, Mr. Yomi Awoyokun, and we're looking at some of the things we're doing in Amogate, and I remember him saying that these days you don't put cybersecurity as an afterthought, right? It's often difficult and sometimes very inefficient, right? Sometimes almost impossible. Sometimes when you're trying to now, think of cybersecurity after you have created the product. That these days you must put security issues must be factored into the creation of your IT product ab initio, your software, and so on and so forth. In the same way, they are saying those who conducted the study, remember, they conducted a study of measuring commercialization of innovation in the EU, and they said, look, the commercialization potential must be assessed from the beginning of the creation in order to achieve financial success, right? Like, before you even talk about adapting the inventions to respond to the market, from the beginning, you must first assess the commercialization potential of that invention. Very, very important. And I think I agree with that. Just like you think about cybersecurity from the beginning of the creation of the software or the IT product, I also agree with them, that it's important to think about the commercialization potential from the beginning, right? They said something that I think is also important. They said it's important to understand that, what aspect of the invention is likely to deliver the most commercialization. I'll say that again. They said it's important to, because you're going to have a product with several aspects, right? It's important to identify what particular part of that invention is going to, deliver the most commercialization. Let me give you a simple example. So, when you're creating, for instance, your computer or a laptop, um, yes, you can charge as much as possible for the laptop, but sometimes some creators think about it and say, you know what, it's a recurrent expenditure that is likely to bring more sustainable income, right? And so when they are creating, they try to ensure that they put in softwares that will require installations, installation updates. They put in software that would require some kind of subscription. And usually when you see them making a lot of money, like the Microsoft on this world, they usually don't make the money from a one-off purchase, right? It's the recurring expenditure that they have built into it ab initio that delivers more sustainable income. And that's just an example that delivers a long-term income. So when you're looking at we are creating when innovation frameworks must help inventors to not just build commercialization into the product ab initio. They must also think about which aspect of the product is likely to bring them the greater financial success, and if I may add, the more sustainable financial success. Very, very, very important, right? Today we look at Meta is the owner of Facebook, and look at what brings them the income. It has been more of the recurring expenditure, the adverts, right? So it's not just enough to create a product. You must think about the product and say, okay, which aspect of this product is likely to bring me as an inventor, bring the nation as a supporting system, much more continuous income, much more sustainable income. I'll give another example. So for instance, let's say you are building a software, right? And you're building a software and you intend to make sure that the software has a global reach, right? In that, for some, it's not going to be about the subscription, the initial subscription. It's probably going to be about the training, the support that you build into it. And you say, okay, for every time we are, or the customization also, not just the training. Say, for every time that we are going to give you this in the basic form. I've seen a lot of software like that. The basic form would be free, right? But for us to customize it to your organizational needs, you will have to pay this. Then for us to, allow X number of users, you have to pay that. For each user that will use it, they'll have to go through an online training, and X amount of dollars would be paid for the online training. I can go on and on. I hope you're getting the point by now. So they're saying again that the possible adaptations to the innovations must also be conceptualized along with the invention. I'll repeat, the possible commercial adaptations. Let me introduce that qualifier. The possible commercial adaptations to the inventions must also be conceptualized ab initio. You must think about it. That's why, like I said, our creed on this program, including the precursor program, has been innovation is a journey from conceptualization all the way to commercialization. At the beginning, at the conceptualization of the product, you must begin to think about the commercialization possibilities, especially the ones that will lead to sustainable long-term income. Very, very important. So even the adaptation, especially the adaptation for commercialization, must be such that you are thinking of the flexibility for increased income must be built into the product ab initio. Again, I was speaking with my colleague, Mr. Awoyemi Awoyoko, and we're looking at particular products we've been working on Amalgate. We've been sort of trying to improve, and we've kept improving on it, trying to build and so on and so forth. And I remember Mr. Awoyemi Awoyoko was saying, look, we have to build in flexibility into this product because we are trying to envision a range of users. So we cannot be rigid in terms of, for instance, number of users, hierarchy of users. We have to build in that flexibility. That way we can have a wider market appeal. So some may want 3 levels of hierarchy, some may want 5 levels of hierarchy, and say, oh, okay, interesting. I agree with you. You are the expert on IT. I am the one that is passionate about innovation, and I've been studying this for years, and together we can think. But it is towards the end of commercialization. I hope we are getting what we're saying here. So the flexibility for adaptation, the adaptation that will lead to further commercialization, according to this report, must be built in ab initio. You don't finish building the product and you're now trying to think of flexibility. Yes, you can attain innovation adaptation after conceptualization, but they are saying that innovation adaptation is better optimized once it is built into the invention from the beginning. Very, very important. Well, my name is still Tolo Madara and I'm with Radio Communications. Talking about driving economic growth with innovation, and we're looking at innovation adaptation for commercialization. I hope you're enjoying the conversation, and I'm glad to have you. We'll soon be wrapping up. Let me just make one or two more points, and then we'll continue on the next episode by the grace of God. Now, they said something that I really liked as well. This study this study that was measuring commercialization success of innovations in the European Union said something that I also like. It said, look, when you're talking about the commercialization process, right, it is good to consider it from two perspectives, right? They said you have to look at you have to look at the capacity to commercialize innovation and also the capacity to commercialize financial performance, right? Let me break down a bit. So according to them, if you're not careful, there are lots of innovation indicators that look at the technological success, right? The technological success, but there are still no, so to say, universal algorithms to identify the potential for commercialization, and there is no algorithm to evaluate its financial effectiveness. You know, why I like this point is because it resonates with me strongly, especially because this is the same thing we identified from a previous study we looked deeply into. And that study said, look, and this was from another region, not even from the European Union. I think this was more from South Korea. And that study was saying, look, what they have found is that there has not been enough research on commercialization, right? That although they have had a lot of, although technology commercialization methods have been discussed, look at the word they use, just discussed. Although technology commercialization methods have been discussed, there has not been sufficient research on specific commercialization strategies. Do you get what they're saying? And this was a research on commercialization strategies for national strategic technologies. You can study it if you want. This was looking more at South Korea, and that's a country whose exports is equal to the 54 countries in Africa, still saying, look, we have not had sufficient study on commercialization process, the research commercialization. Now, look at this study far away in European Union. This is South Korea at one end of the world and European Union at another end of the world. And this study measuring commercialization success in European Union is saying essentially the same thing as that which was done in South Korea. This study, this EU study, the European Union study is saying, look, there are lots of innovation indicators, especially when it comes to measuring the technological success, right, of the invention. Whether this software, for instance, does what it's said to achieve, whether this app, creates the intended impact in the market, whether this device, brings the disruption, and so on and so forth. But the study is saying there is still no universal algorithm to identifying potential to commercialization, and there is no, algorithm for evaluating its financial effectiveness. So there are two things the study is saying here. Remember, this study is advocating for building commercialization into innovation ab initio from the foundation, right? The study is saying, look, that potential for commercialization that they are saying is important to evaluate before funds are poured into the innovative activities. There is we don't have enough algorithms for studying it, and there are not enough algorithms for also evaluating financial effectiveness. Now, what does this mean for us on this program? This means that, like we've been saying, it is time to fund more research commercialization activities. Very, very, very important. As part of national innovation frameworks, as part of national innovation systems, it is time to begin to refund. It is time to begin to reset the path to research commercialization, optimal path to research commercialization. We should deliberately be saying we are giving PhD grants, we are giving competition grants to say we want to stimulate, efficiency, if I can put it that way, efficiency in research commercialization. How do we study more of research commercialization? How do we identify effective research commercialization path, efficient research efficiency there including speed to market, efficiencies there including speed to scaling, and so on and so forth, right? It's really important for these things to be intentionally done, right? And not just intentionally done, but intentionally stimulated and intentionally fast-tracked. Very, very, very important. Well, I'll drop one last point and then we'll wrap it up for this particular episode. Again, we're looking at innovation adaptation. Remember, we have said, look, this adaptation has to be factored in. The flexibility for the adaptation that leads to commercialization is better built into the product ab initio. It's better built into the invention from the foundation. That way, it becomes easier to achieve innovation adaptation for commercialization. Secondly, we are also saying that the algorithms for measuring commercialization potential financial effectiveness needs to be something that we do more to invest in, to expand, to research. In other words, we need to do more research on research commercialization. Well, the last thing I want to talk about is that measurement framework, right? The measurement framework. So this study then did something that I like. They are advocating for a measurement framework that looks at the technological aspect as the input, so to say, right? The technological aspect, but also looks at the output, right? As a sub, the measurement framework must have a sub element that looks at the output, right? Now, under this output, they put some indicators like exports of high-tech products, right? How much of this high-tech, using technology as an example, because there can be other forms of inventions, right? But using technology as an example, they said, look, what about the patent and patent applications, intellectual property applications? And they said, yes, research publications could also be an indicator, but is more than indirect indicator of commercial success. Research publications would likely lead to patent and patent applications, and patent and patent applications, then patent there meaning intellectual property, would then lead to export of high-tech products. Very, very important. And so, in measuring the commercialization potential, right, to wrap this episode up, in measuring the commercialization potential, it is very important to not just look at the technological success of the invention, but also the financial success from the point of the potential. That's from the beginning. There must be a way to measure the commercialization potential and then the financial success. That way, we will not have innovation for the sake of innovation, but innovation for the sake of economic growth. Wow. This is what we're going to enjoy cutting on today's edition of the program. I hope I've made some sense to you. The emphasis today has been on innovation adaptation for commercialization, and we've said it's very important that this is not an afterthought. The flexibility for adaptation, the adaptation that will lead to commercialization, must be built into the inventions from the beginning. Also, there needs to be more research done on successful paths to commercialization, and that way it is easier to build that commercialization potential, to increase the commercialization potential, to optimize the commercialization potential. The research is largely indicating that there is still insufficient understanding of the paths that lead to commercialization. And lastly, we emphasize the need to develop measurement frameworks that look at the technological aspect, but also measure the commercial potential in inventions. Thank you so much for doing this with us. Remember, we are here to support you with this. We are here to help you build these frameworks as nations, frameworks for driving economic potential with innovation, frameworks for measuring commercialization potential in innovations, frameworks for developing innovation processes that ensure both technological success and financial success at large scale. This is what we do. This is what we are passionate about. we are very, very good at what we do. We do what we love, and believe me, we also love what we do. My other colleagues will be here from tomorrow through the end of the week, and also on Monday. Remember, we are here sharing knowledge, distilling knowledge from close to 2 decades of expertise, experience, institutional competence in what we do. We'll be here to share more. My colleague Abiodun Abari will be here talking about optimizing opportunities in the Ethiopian banking sector, sharing the supposed challenges, but also the possibilities in the ongoing reforms in the Ethiopian banking sector. My colleague Daniel Adebi will be here with you on Thursday, talking about aligning educational reforms with national development. So again, it's not educational reforms for the sake of educational reforms, but for the sake of national development. And of course, my colleague Dr. Tisila Obushana will also be here with you on Friday, looking at economic issues, this quarter focusing on financial inclusion. And please also remember to join Mr. Adjola Gbadebo on Monday as he talks about, adopting an innovative approach to your career acceleration. Thank you so much again. Remember to follow us on all our handles on social media. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram at Amogate, and our website is www.theamogate.org. There's nothing we look forward to more than partnering with you to grow at national, institutional, and organizational. Thank you so much again, and I'll see you same time, same station next week by Close Space. Until then, have a beautiful month of June.